Yep, sounds good. All right, cool.
Hey, anybody else need to sign it?
Okay, Alana, you're with us?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Did you get my email about the practice test?
Yes.
Okay. Well, we're gonna do that toward the end of class, and I just wanted you to have the printed material. Were you able to get that?
Yes, I don't have it printed out yet, but I'll just try it and print it out after class.
Okay. Well, I'm gonna be showing some images, and, you've got time if you wanna get Mr. Rowan or one of the assistants there to print that out for you so that you'll have it in a little bit. That might be helpful.
Okay, thank you.
Uh-huh. Okay, welcome back. Hopefully, if you didn't get the study tips for chapter 1 and 2, I have them printed here. We'll talk about this a little bit later on. Everybody can sign in. And what you need for money is this, okay? This is the little packet they sell at the bookstore. It's green Scantrons, all right? I don't have any. I mean, somebody left this with me last time because I had loaned whatever I did have out, but I think there's half a dozen or so of these in here, okay? So you will not have time if you get here at 11 o'clock to rush over there and buy this. So do it before you come to class, okay? Either today or, you know.
Are they open tomorrow?
I don't know. What's tomorrow? Friday, yeah. I think the bookstore is open Monday through Friday, okay? So you shouldn't have any difficulty. It's the green Scantrons that you're gonna need. Okay, so having said all of that, let's jump right back into chapter 2, which is the chapter on wine. And we're not gonna take time to go to Smart History or go to any videos. We don't have time to do that today. So I want you to really stay with me. You know how to take down the essential facts at this point. I'm not gonna even pull up a study guide, but if I say write it in the box, you ought to write it in the box. And I might forget to say that sometime, but you know just by my inflection of my voice, and if I have referenced a vocabulary term, then you know that it's gonna be part of your list for the chapter 2. In fact, it'd be a good idea for you to get your chapter 2 vocabulary out, which I gave to you quite a while back, the vocabulary terms, because we'll be using quite a few of those as we go through the PowerPoint. Now, the exact opposite, speaking of the word exact, I spent quite a bit of time yesterday looking at a work that was all about exact, and now we're looking at a work that is all about the opposite of exact. Notice, this is an installed work. Matthew Ritchie is the artist. You can see the beautiful wooden floor of the gallery space. You can see that this installed piece doesn't sit on the floor, but elevates and levitates above the floor by use of these long, thin, vertical supports. And notice how the element of light casts a shadow down onto that floor space, which is an echo of the linear pattern itself. So that elevation and the use of light is very important here. Notice also that Matthew Ritchie has work on the wall and in between his paintings. This meandering, ever complex line travels up the wall and around all, so 4 walls of this gallery space. So we get a better idea here about a work of art that is an installed work. Is it a painting or is it a sculpture? It's both. The painting has jumped off the wall into our space, and you can see a little idea of the size of his paintings due to the figure that's here, you get a little sense of reference. A meandering, curvilinear line, these are descriptions I think you need to write down. This is simply, this is not simple, there's nothing simple about it. And notice, I'd like you to write conceptual art again, because the title of this piece is called Proposition Player. Anybody want to give an interpretation of what that means to you? Proposition player? Proposition player, just the two words themselves, without even thinking about the visual. Proposition, player. Any idea what that means at all?
Maybe trying to give you a choice of how to view it.
Okay? He's trying to get in your brain, right? Proposition player, what does that have to do with what you see? What's a proposition? I'm gonna make you a proposition. Huh? Let's make a deal. Okay? Proposition can have a good connotation or a not so good one, right? Probably be put in jail for some propositions, right? Okay? Player. A player. What kind of connotation does that bring to mind?
Football team.
It's a game, right? You're a player. Player also has positive and negative connotations in today's society, right?
Yes.
What would be a negative connotation? She's a player. He's a player. Yeah, it's kind of a loose, not so complimentary moral connotation, isn't it? Right? They live loose. Y'all know what that means. But proposition player together, in some ways, is exactly the diametric opposite of 3 exact rules. Think about it. 3 exact rules, it's all self-evident. Proposition player, things are not self-evident. There's a lot of chance and risk involved, right? Possibly. Look at this meandering line. In and out, over and under. Complicated. There's confusion and complexity when you think about following that path, right? So Matthew Ritchie is probably, by giving this the title proposition player, we don't have him here to interview, but I think you can make your own and draw your own conclusion about this very arduous journey if you were to follow the pathway of that meandering, curving line, correct? You ever heard the phrase, oh, what a tangled web we weave? What's the rest of the line?
And we try to conceive.
When first we practice to deceive. When we used to lie to my parents, my dad would always say that. Oh, my children won't lie to me. Well, what kind of idiot are you? You do lie. Children will lie to you. It's just, you're just totally naive to think that a teenager isn't going to lie about where they were or this, that, and the other. It's just the way it is. But hey, we always got found out usually. And my dad did other things other than just say that to us. I would just say there were other consequences to our lies, but the deception, the web of lies, I don't know. I think about the complexity of this and how life can get really messy like this sometimes, right? Maybe you're in a pathway right now of your life that's just quite exact and hey, everything's clicking, you're in your routine, nobody's throwing obstacles in your path, but hey, maybe some of you are not in that condition right now. Maybe you're have some challenges. So there's a lot of ways that we can interpret this, but what I want you to know about this work is that it is all about the element of lying, isn't it? Also, reminiscent is the action painting and the expressive paintings of Jackson Pollock and the abstract expressionists. As I look at Matthew Ritchie's works, they're not exactly like Pollock. He is using some beautiful gold leaf metallic along with his black fluid inky line, black oil enamel. They're a little different, but we can't help but think about artists that have worked in this linear fashion in the past. We just bring it to the table if we have an education. Anybody that looks at Matthew Ritchie's installed work here is automatically going to make a mental or a visual reference to something that you may have seen like this before. Meandering line, it's an installed work, and it's a conceptual work. The line is not geometric, it's what we call organic or curvilinear. Those are words that you ought to write down in the box, okay? So, here we have an image that explores the quality of line. And Frank Hurley is the photographer that happened to be Johnny on the spot when this particular ship in 1915 was trapped in this ice berg, so to speak. Entrapped. And it's a very dramatic photograph because of the element of value. The light, dark is at the most extreme, isn't it? You might see a little gray here and there, but we mainly see this dark backdrop with like a spotlight, really focusing on that very dramatic scene. And here we have, instead of curvilinear lines, we have a bunch of geometric lines, none of which seem to be vertical. They're all leaning, they're all askew. This mast might be the only vertical thing, but it still looks like it's a bit at an angle. Diagonal line, diagonal line. Compositional structure is? Diagonality. It is what it is. It's dominated by all of these diagonal lines. Now, we talked the other day about the psychological quality of a line. If it's straight, there's a certain kind of formality and stability, just like you are a member of the military standing at attention, or you're the Egyptian pharaoh, you are up and down straight, like a flagpole. If you see a line that's horizontal, we normally think of passivity, because when we sleep, we are horizontal, most of us. Unless you can't sleep unless you're in a chair these days. You've got a back issue, right? Passivity. The landscape, we think of the passive quality of a distant landscape, right? But when we walk or run, we are at a diagonal, right? When movement occurs, we get rid of the vertical or horizontal, and we are in some kind of a diagonal position, kind of like after a tornado comes through. What used to be vertical and horizontal is never going to be plumb again. It's just a tangled mess, right? Chaos, drama is communicated by the idea of the tension between these diagonals, plus the extreme value contrast. So I write value contrast, diagonality is the compositional structure, and the name of this ship is the Endurance. It is a powerful image, and it gives me pause. I haven't really done research on this event that actually occurred, and I'm wondering, where in the world is Frank Hurley? How did he happen upon the scene? Obviously, this is in a very cold environment, so it would be interesting to research how this photographer actually got there and was able to capture this image, and what compelled him to photograph this ship and then title it The Endurance by Night. The Endurance by Night. The Endurance is probably the name of the ship, and obviously it's a nighttime shot. The author just is sharing this with you because we're trying to learn about the symbolic quality of line. Line can be symbolic. It can symbolize drama, chaos, tension. When a line is smooth and curving, or if a line is jagged and geometric, it makes us feel different ways. All right? So that's what we want to examine as we look at the images here, the first of the chapter. Now, next up, we have two basic different categories of line. We have actual line and we have implied line. And it is what it is. This is a painting. It's called Swing 64. It was made in 1964. And the art movement that it was part of is called color field. The color field movement. Hard edge movement. And this is after the discovery of acrylic paint, which we know is water-based and dries quickly. It's kind of a plastic that was invented in the 1950s, and suddenly we see these artists that are interested in these hard edge paintings just using the element of line and color. What's the compositional structure, guys?
The L.
You'll see.
It is what it is. The L, the L, the L, the L. And notice it's quite large in scale. Actually, this is about 36 by 36. This is about the size of the painting. But it's an actual line. It has a 90-degree angle, and the lines have different colors, right? That's it. Actual line. Now we have an image that was created way back in the 1800s, 1857, by a Victorian England British woman by the name of Emily Mary Osborne. It's titled Nameless and Friendless. Yes?
I think you're missing a picture.
Am I?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, we'll come back to the horizontal line image underneath by Alma Thomas. Let me pull my lights up for a minute. I don't have her image. I don't have that image in the PowerPoint. Y'all see the image there by Alma Thomas?
Yeah.
What could you say about the composition there?
Horizontal line.
So what would the structure be?
Horizontal.
Horizontality. Your eye goes side to side to side to side to side to side. And unlike Sam Gillam, her lines are made up of these little broken patches. Do you see it? But what is in common about both of those paintings is that they are both made up of actual lines. One's kind of a dotted line, and the other is a real hard line like you see here. Everybody agree?
Yes.
And they have different feels to them. Thomas's painting is, because of the horizontality, it has a different effect on you. And it's a little bit more populated with color. So we get a different effect, but both of those paintings represent what we call actual line. And thank you for pointing that out. I just don't have it in my PowerPoint. It's in your book, okay? So next up, beside the picture, you need to write implied line or psychological line. Both phrases mean the same thing. And since we are human beings, and this is an image in an art dealer's shop, let's just say, I'm going to put the lights for a moment. We're looking at multiple figures, and we are human beings as well, and so we automatically will look at faces. And we see implications, don't we? Look at the gentleman that's examining the image, the artwork. He's got his hand on his chin, and what's he looking at?
The artwork.
And what direction do his eyes go?
Down to the left.
Yeah. You've got the implication there. Others of you might have noticed the lone woman standing with her eyes downcast to the floor. The little boy He's got a beeline on the art dealer. He's waiting for the decision. Will we purchase the work? Will we accept or reject? He's holding the portfolio. Here is the implication of these men checking out the woman. There's an implication of the accountant back here doing his book work. Does everybody follow what implied line means? Look at the implied line. She's holding a rosary, and her finger points us all the way over to the chair. So we've got a crisscross series of implied lines. These are probably two of the strongest that we see. Does everybody understand? So imply is just exactly that. It's an implied or a suggested eye movement, but it just as strong as an actual line. Now this painting is also made up of actual lines. Look at all these actual lines. Vertical, 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 vertical. A diagonal line here and here. Then we have a zigzag, zigzag, zigzag line making the diamond pattern of the tile floor. We have curvilinear line, the detail of the chair, curvilinear balustrade and the stair, and the ironwork there. So we have all kinds of implied lines and actual lines. Would you agree? Lines that go vertical, lines that go horizontal, lines that go diagonal, lines that are straight, lines that are curved. This is full of different kinds of line. But the author is trying to teach you about implied line or psychological line. They mean the same thing. Now, we've already talked about line having direction. Vertical, horizontal, or diagonal. Another kind of line, and you all learned this from early on, looking at coloring books, the concept of an outline. And then also a contour line. An outline is an actual line, a concrete mark that defines the boundary or the outer edge of an object or a figure. A contour line is not an actual line, but an edge that is perceived where a three-dimensional form curves away from the viewer. Here we've got the birth of Venus. Do you see the contour line around her jawline? It's a solid line, isn't it? You see all the lines here in the hair? That's another example of a contour line. We have a clear definition of the edge in an outline sense. And this is painted in 1480. Notice, 1503, 23 years later, we have Leonardo on the scene. This is a tempera on canvas painting, and this is an oil painting on wood. We don't have hard outlines around the jaw. We have modeling in chiaroscuro. So Mona Lisa looks a whole lot more illusionistic or photographic than does Botticelli's female figure of Venus. Would you agree? This is much more three-dimensional. So outline and contour line is present in both pieces, but we have the added benefit of value gradation across a form. The Italians called it chiaroscuro, and that's interpreted in English to mean modeling. And that information is there for you in italics. If you look at the book, over on the next page, you'll see chiaroscuro modeling in boldface to the right of Mona Lisa. Do y'all see that in your book? So both of those terms need to be put by the picture. The author is trying to teach you about outline and about contour line. And we've got some other images that are going to be demonstrating those concepts. Dunes by Edward Weston. Look at this beautiful photograph of the sand dunes. And it's just simply entitled Dunes Oceana, 1936. Here we can see some hard edges of the shadows and the edges of the dunes. But what we have now, everybody look, see these cross contour lines that travel across the dunes like a topographical map? They are repeated and they help us understand that this is not flat. You follow me? So here we have even what we call cross contour lines. But this photograph, which is a black and white gelatin print photograph, I think the beauty lies in, look at the personality of the line. They're very sensuous and curving and flowing and repeated, like skipping a stone across the water to see the ripples. It makes me want to go sit by the beach and just listen to the waves. Or sit in a boat in the middle of the lake and listen to the waves lap up against the edge of the boat. Relaxing, repeated, almost hypnotic, if you think about it, right? We like it because it's predictable, these rhythms, these repeated cross-contour rhythms that we see in Edward Weston's photograph. Edward Weston was innovative with photography because one of the things that made him unique is that he would zoom in. And we almost even lose the identity of what this is, don't we? Because it's cropped in. And we just see the shapes and the values and the lines, and maybe we can connect with the fact that it's the sand dune. If you've never been to the beach and been on a sand dune, then that might not be as easily understandable, but it's got a beautiful abstract quality to it because he's zoomed in. So we can appreciate this in relation to contour and cross-contour line, write both of those things down, and value contrast. The element of value, we can't talk about color. And organic shape. Organic shape means shape that comes from nature. Irregular, curvilinear. All right, here are the terms that we just talked about. Chiaroscuro and modeling create the illusion of 3-dimension on a 2-dimensional surface. Now, we've already talked about line patterns in terms of cross-contour line, but now we're going to see what cross-hatching is, what hatching is, and what stippling is. Okay, in a nutshell. Hatching is when you take a line at a diagonal and you just repeat it, repeat it, repeat it, repeat it, repeat it, repeat it, repeat it. It's called hatching. When you go over it with the alternate direction, it's called cross-hatching. And stippling is dot, 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 dot. Right? Easy peasy. Here's an image that's full of hatching and cross-contour line and outline and cross-hatching where it gets very dark and dense. This is an etching, and it's a print that can be reproduced. And Angelica Kaufman wasn't working with pen and ink. She could have been, but she wasn't. She was working with a burin, which is a sharp needle-like tool on a piece of zinc metal and scratching all these lines, drawing and making marks on metal. And when the image is completed, it's inked and it's put through a press and it transfers the image onto another surface. When we get to the chapter on printmaking, you'll see what I'm talking about. If I gave you a piece of white paper and a black fine point marker, like an extra fine point Sharpie, you could do a nice little drawing just like this. It would look very similar. because of the use of line. Printmaking is about line. So I'd like you to know that it's an etching, and again, 1770, the title is Hebe, but it's like showing off. Contour line, hatching, cross-hatching, and look how her thigh, as the fabric drapes over her legs, we know that her legs are rounded, just like we knew that those sand dunes were also rounded, cross-contour. So artists have to know how to use line really well if they want to be printmakers. Here's another print. It's not an etching, it's a lino cut. Everybody knows what a linoleum floor is, right? Usually a linoleum tile floor comes in pieces of 12 by 12. Our building is full of them. We don't have a lot of carpet on our floors. If I ripped up one of those 12 by 12 pieces of linoleum and got me a gouging tool, I could carve a pattern into it. It's rather rubbery and soft. And so here we have Elizabeth Catlett using the element of line, hatching lines, vertical hatching lines, cross contour lines that are hatched. She's using line, crossing the contour of the form to help us understand that the neck is rounded and that the face has age to it. And what kind of hat are we wearing? How do you know?
Because of the line.
Because of the pattern of the lines, right? So, here we've got another good example of how line can be a wonderful tool to create an image. Two different prints, etching and lino cut. Next up, we know that line creates shape. Shape can be flat, it can be solid, and have mass. Shape can also be a void, like a volume. So here we're going to get some examples of visual definitions of all three of these words. Shape describes flat enclosed areas, such as a circle, right? Volume is the measurable space within a three-dimensional form or an object, its capacity. You learned this in a math class, right? If I told you the width, the height, and the depth of this room, you could figure out its volume, couldn't you?
Yeah.
You could figure out how much water it would hold, right? You always see volume written on anything that's got liquid, right, or solids. It says the volume, and that's a mathematical determination, right? Volume. It's a space that can be filled, a measurable space. Mass has got some interesting connotations, but it is the bulk of a solid, of a three-dimensional forms. Solid forms have what we call actual mass. I think of mass when I think of those big boulders out in the Wichita Mountains, right? They're heavy, they're solid, they have bulk. As I look around the room at some of your book bags that you carry around, some of them are way too heavy for you, but they have a sense of mass and bulk, right? So, mass has another connotation that's usually never good. Who knows what I'm talking about?
Weight.
Well, we know that mass is also another kind of mathematical concept. But we also have heard they found a mass.
A lot, multiple.
They found a mass where it shouldn't be, the size of a grapefruit. You ever heard that? In your brain or in your stomach. You know, a mass. Is it malignant? Is it benign? It's never a good connotation. A tumor, a mass, is a solid in your body where it should not be, right? So I want you to think of mass as being something solid, okay? So let's look at some visuals. Here we have flat shapes. Theo van Doesburg, once again, is called Countercomposition of Dissonances, 1925. Beautiful triadic colored yellow, blue, red, if you want to write that down. It's a triangle of color, yellow, blue, red, primary, that is accentuated by these diagonal bold lines that separate the squares and the rectangles. And it's flat. There is no sense of depth whatsoever. There's no modeling. But then again, Theo van Doesburg is all about making modern art, which happens to be very flat. It's geometric shape. That's another word you should write down. And there's actually two different compositional structures that would apply here. The grid that's been turned on the diagonal. Diagonality and the grid. I think you could apply both of those to the way this was composed. Now, here's Theo van Doesburg and Cornelius van Esteren. These are Dutch artists. Notice, Model Mason de Artiste. It's a maquette design for the reconstruction of the Municipal Museum in The Hague, the Netherlands. Notice, it's got the same beautiful yellow, blue, red, but we're not looking at anything flat anymore, are we? We're looking at a volume. We have height, we have width, we have depth. Solid and voids. So it's a beautiful example of solids and voids. It's a volume. It's not flat. However, it is geometric. And notice, even in this three-dimensional form, we have a grid structure. Y'all see that? Very modern, apartment-like structure that was designed for the Municipal Museum in The Hague, the Netherlands. And look at the year, 1923. This was so modern and new and clean and distilled for the way architecture looked in 1923. It can compete with something that could be built 10 years from now because it has that clean, modern quality. Would you agree? Mm-hmm. It doesn't look, visualize this. What did an automobile look like in 1923? It was a big old black clunky thing, right?
Yeah.
You just drive it right up and park it beside it. It would seem so out of place, wouldn't it? For the modernity of this design. Okay? Okay. This is the Schroeder House, also in the Netherlands. So it's not a model like this. It is the real physical work. 1924, a year later, this work, this residence, the Schroeder House, the Schroeder family, was built by Gerrit Rietveld in the Netherlands. So we can see that in Holland, the Netherlands, Dutch architects really were on the front cutting edge of modernism and modern architecture. And this is a textbook work of architecture. Any architecture student will know what the Schroeder House looks like because it's in every single architectural history book. And it's a museum today. You can go and tour and see the beautiful solids and voids that make up this volume that we call the Schroeder House. And then we have the Red Pyramid. Speaking of mass, speaking of solid and bulky and heavy, see the difference? This is open, you can go into it. The pyramid is solid and massive. This pyramid, on the other hand, is what?
Blue.
Is it a shape? Is it a volume? Or is it a mass?
I think it's all three.
It's a volume because you can go inside of it. It has measurable, occupiable space inside. Everybody look back here at the wall. See these black cabinets? The doors are shut on them, aren't they? This could be a solid form. And if I tried to open the door, it could just be all fake. It could just be solid, right? But it's not. It's a volume that I can go into. You understand the difference?
Okay.
Okay? So the pyramid, the red pyramid is solid. This is not. This has an occupiable space. It sits in front of the Louvre. I.M. Pei pyramid. It was installed in 1989. So I think it's a beautiful explanation of actual mass and volume, which is a measurable, occupiable space. And I'm sorry, my slides are doing this. On page 29 in your book, or the next image. So many slides have gotten messed up. You've got these two, you've got an interesting image here. Untitled 2 is the name of the image. Gert van Elk is the artist, and it is a photo laid down on canvas and acrylic paint. It's rather large, and it is another piece that I will say is a conceptual work. Maybe I can find it and put it in here real quick. Okay, here we go. Alana, can you still see the PowerPoint?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. All right, so here we have the full image. It's kind of a curious piece. Gert van Elk has got kind of an interesting personality, it seems. This is implied mass. It's not actual mass. Like this. This is actual, right? 3-dimensional. This is a 2-dimensional surface with the painting of a very solid triangular shape representing similar to a pyramid, and it has a sense of being very solid, and you can't go through it. You got to either go around it or over it. And these two guys, what does this mean to anyone? Y'all want to share? He's left it very, very benign, Untitled 2. How many of you have ever felt like this in your life?
Actual wall.
Yeah. Maybe your job is giving you fits. Maybe you work for a difficult boss. Maybe you are trying to climb the corporate ladder and you've hit a impenetrable obstacle. It's frustrating, right? Look at the two guys there. So we can interpret this any way we want to, can't we? Based on our life experience and based on the image. And they got their hand up, which is kind of an interesting, if you look closely. Their head is just embedded, their bodies are they're stuck, aren't they? Maybe having the hands up gives some sense of hope, I don't know. But it's an interesting work. It's not a painting that we can look at and just quickly understand. It's a conceptual work that makes you think. It might bring a little unease to you because you can't just readily put your thumb on it. But I think we all can get the idea that this is a impenetrable mass. There's a roadblock here. And these guys are stuck.
Like they reached their limit.
They reached their limit, right? So, if you live life long enough, you're gonna feel like this at some point. So you gotta be resilient, you gotta be tough, mentally tough, physically tough to get through life. Life is not always a bowl of cherries, right? Best thing you can do if you've got kids is teach them how to be resilient. You know, that's one thing sports does, really. There's lots of ways to teach a child to be able to bounce back, but we've got to have some mental toughness to get through our lives and be successful and not get bogged down and stuck. So these are the things I think about when I see this image. It's an implied mass. Write it down, implied. Next up, we've got an image that's quite beautiful, brilliant. It's large, Dorothea Rockburn, Pascal's Provincial Letters. She's working with these bright, rather flat and solid geometric shapes. We get a sense of transparency as we can see through the square into another square. And then in part of the painting, we see it's not flat. We see the gradation of one color into another, which gives it some visual interest. Look at this painting. And then remember this painting. This is totally flat. This has more of a sense of variety because of the treatment of the surface of the colors. This is not flat. It has gradients of color that give it a little bit more visual interest and impact, and also suggest a little bit of space. It's geometric shape. That's what the author wants you to know. What category of art would you say this is? Remember our categories?
Non-representational.
Yes, I would say it's non-objective or non-representational. Here we have a beautiful structure that is anything but conventional, and it is in Balboa, Spain. It is the Guggenheim Museum by Frank Gehry, who is an American architect that has just made a huge worldwide splash. And you'll remember Daniel Libeskind when he was talking about the covering of his building with metal. He didn't want it to be a shiny Balboa use of metal like Gehry has done here in Balboa, Spain. That's who Libeskind was referring to. This is a beautiful museum, the Guggenheim Museum. Remember Peggy Guggenheim, how she liked Jackson Pollock, remember? And she started purchasing up a lot of his work and showed in the Guggenheim Museum in New York City. Same family, lots of money. And we've got the Guggenheim Museum also there in Spain. And it doesn't look like anything we've ever seen before. It has movement. It's curvilinear shape. It's rather organic shape. And it is also referred to as, what does the author reference this? There's a little phrase. Metallic flower. Write it down. Metallic flower. Gehry referred to his building as a metallic flower. Others have found the billowing curvilinear shapes to be reminiscent of ships, linking the machine tool structure that is perched on the water's edge to the history of Balboa as an international seaport. So Frank Gehry was very artistic in his design, understanding the history of this seaport, building the museum, putting it on the water's edge and making it look like a ship. Metallic flower, curvilinear shape, beautiful reflective surfaces of that stainless steel. Look at it at night.
And so that would be considered representation.
Well, it is representing what it is. It's a museum. So this is a photograph representing the museum. It's not abstract, it's not non-objective. It's unconventional. We're not used to seeing buildings like this, so it was very creative. And it's certainly great fodder for photographers. Here is Frank Gehry. It's called the Balboa Effect. And this was the first of many structures that he built where it almost looks like he's taking a regular structure and morphing it, right? Making what was vertical, maybe skyscraper, making it curve and turn. Like a child, very childlike.
So is that spider part of the?
It's a sculpture by another
Oh.
artist. It's just an on-site sculpture. It's not part of the structure. But this is an art museum, so that's an outside piece of sculpture there. Look at some of the other photographs showing the curves of what he called his metallic flower. Next up, organic shape. And here we have Casa Mia, apartment house in Barcelona, Spain. And you probably have never seen anything like this. This was built in 1905. Look at the undulating, curving, in and out balconies. Taking something that we normally think of as geometric and imbuing it with organic concrete, reinforced concrete, and ironwork. These are like ivy-like balusters that protect the balconies of each one. Just a beautiful, creative example of organic. Next up, I'm going very quickly because of the imagery, and I want to give us a little practice test here in a bit. Here we have the very first work of modern art. Write it down. The first modern painting ever. The year is 1907. The artist is Pablo Picasso. This lives at the Modern Museum in New York City called MoMA. And I've seen it several times in person. It's quite beautiful to view. We're going to revisit this a little bit later on, but I want you to look at what was normally organic has now become geometric. What is normally a figure that we can understand in one piece has now become fragmented. And here we have the addition of African and Iberian masks representing faces. Here we have the figures and the ground I can't quite make sense of. The space has been compressed. This is called cubism. Write it down. Capital C. Fragmentation, isolation, geometric shape, multiple viewpoints. These are some of the abstraction techniques that Picasso used as he interpreted these women that stayed on Avignon Street in Spain. The ladies of Avignon. And you can just speculate about who they were and what they did. Okay? Picasso was not French. He was a Spaniard, a hot-blooded Spaniard, with all that goes along with it. He frequented the brothels on Avignon Street, well aware of the women. We'll talk later about the meaning of this painting, but I just want you to know that it is the first modern work of art coined by the art critics. It is a work that introduced Cubism. And remember, we looked in 1915 at Louis Pabova's study for a portrait in Russia that had all these same qualities. But hey, Picasso did it first. This is 1907. That was 1915, right? In Alabama, we have Robert Colescott, 1985. And look what he has done. What do we call it when somebody makes art from art that's already made?
Appropriation.
Appropriation, write it down. Robert Colescott is appropriated from Picasso, and he is presenting his Ladies of Alabama. It's a compare and contrast that the author has given you between the two images. We can say that one is geometric and the other is organic. You see the main difference here? We see a very similar composition. We see placement of the figures as a similarity, but they've been treated more gently, more sensuously by Colescott, because he's kept their curves, hasn't he? All right, so just knowing that this is geometric, this is organic, and on we go. Now, this is a work that was created by Umberto Boccioni, Italian. The Italians interpreted Cubism in a movement that they call Futurism. Write it down, Futurism. This is futuristic art. Futurism was an Italian movement that was in response to the madness between World War I and World War II. The fast mechanism, the noise of the city, the propelling airplane prop, the cyclist cycling and moving. It's like taking Cubism and putting it on steroids. And everything is about motion. Can you still see the cyclist? The title is Dynamism of a Cyclist. Where's the cyclist?
See,
Anybody see him?
it looks like I can see him
Yes,
moving
I see
handlebars.
Maybe the calf of his leg, but he's been fragmented, he's been isolated, he's been repeated, taken apart. We see the arch, you know, I see people cycling all the time, and if they're on a real speed bike, they're hunched over, and you know, they got their little pants on, and their little helmet on, and it's a serious business if you're a cyclist, right? What's that race is fixing to come up this summer. Hotter than hell.
Yeah.
How in the world do these people cycle up to the top of Mount Scott in July? Why would they do it in July? But it's tough, man. You gotta be tough. People are out training for it right now. A lot of people have converted. Instead of this kind of bicycle, they've converted to a different kind of bicycle now. Have y'all noticed? But still, there's some serious cyclists that are interested in speed and the dynamics of speed. And so here we have what's called a futurist work of art, and it is highly abstract. Would you agree? We can hardly recognize the original subject. But if you look, you can see, especially if you've ever ridden a speed bike, a 10-speed, right? And felt the strain of your back as you hunch over, right? I can't ride those kind of bikes anymore. I got big fat tires now and I have a regular seat. But I've got a real nice Puma 10-speed bike that I just look at because I don't like riding it anymore. The tires are real tiny. You know, it's not built for comfort. And I'm not interested in speed. So I ride my regular old bike now. Okay. A new word, amorphous. 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 The word even sounds like what it is. Amorphous. The syllables and the phonics of the word are soft. An amorphous shape is a shape that doesn't have a determined edge. It bleeds. It's confused. Okay? And it's wonderful. It makes us feel a different way. Right? So these are soft, kind of bleeding shapes. We can determine some of the edges, but then others just bleed into each other. Helen Frankenthaler, color field is the movement. Fields of color. 1958 is when this was made. It's called Before the Caves. And it's a beautiful example of shape that does not have clear definition. Works with amorphous shapes may create a shapeless impression. You can't put your thumb on it. It evades you. It is soft and indeterminate. Here is another interesting installed work. Judy Foff, 3D, 1983. Steel, perforated steel, plywood, wood veneers, plexiglass, contact paper, tin, wire, and paint. Here is another example of an installed work of art. And you can see as you walk through it that you can barely make sense of some things. Some things have nice determinate edges, others are amorphous. We can't quite make them out. Maybe this looks like your garage or your junk room or your teenager's bedroom, whatever. It is purposefully complex. Would you agree? Some people can't be in spaces like this. It makes them claustrophobic, right? And other people just, I like my clutter. I like my stuff. You know, I'll pile it up. Come to my office sometime. I got lots of stuff and it's just gone everywhere. But I know where everything is, right? It's my stuff. This has got that interesting kind of feeling of indetermination. Some things are confusing, but we know that it's very complex. The yellow, the blue, the red make us feel a little bit uplifted perhaps, but it's convoluted and it's noisy. Would you agree? It's noisy. It's not like this. Positive shape and negative space. We normally think of the subjects in a work of art as the positive shapes. Everybody calls this the background, but in a work of art, that's called the negative space. Positive shape, negative space. Edgar Degas, the Impressionist movement. Notice, these are not important women. They're ironing. This is that group of artists that, like Renoir, just wanted to paint what they wanted to paint. Edgar Degas uses kind of broken brushstroke, and he's showing these women performing a domestic chore. So we are out of the box of the three things that artists did for hundreds of years because we are in Impressionism. 1874. Positive shape, negative space. Easy to understand. Everybody agree?
Mm-hmm.
Now look at this painting. You ready? What's the positive shape and what's the negative space?
Would the positive shape be the two figures and maybe the animal in the foreground?
Okay, but it takes you a while to read this, doesn't it?
Yes.
Because the colors in the negative space are just as bright, if not more so, than the shapes of the women. This is entitled Laundresses and Arles. Another example of artists that like to depict women working. And this image, I think, is easier to read, the positive and negative shapes, right? This one becomes a little bit confusing because of the brightness of that color. And then look at Andrew Adolphus. This is a photograph. Can you figure out what the subject is?
Well, it's a picture of like a puddle reflecting the buildings.
Right, and it takes you a while to figure that out. Here's the earth, here's the water, and these images are being reflected off of that. Now, this has been assisted with Photoshop, I guarantee you, in 2013, but it's a very compelling image, I think you'll agree.
So the subject is the puddle?
Well, we've got pebbles, and the physical reality is this is a reflection off of a little puddle of water. And you might recognize the two buildings, and you could say those would be the subject. But how the subject is presented is through this reflection. Does that make sense? So it's tricky, isn't it? Positive shape, negative space. Do you see the vase first or the faces first? Who sees the vase first? Raise your hand.
The first time I ever saw the image, the vase, and then
Okay, do you feel your brain switch? You see the two profiles of the faces looking inward? That's called figure ground reversal. Write it down. They flip. We are conditioned to read dark on a light ground because that's just how most printing is done. But your brain will switch and you will see the alternative, won't you? It reverses.
So where's the images again?
Here's your vase,
Right?
and then here's the side of the person's face.
Oh,
Aha! Now you see it. It's called reversal. A lot of graphic artists rely on this power of shape in advertising and in poster design. This idea of positive shape and negative space is what makes up our logos and posters that are highly graphic images. Shape is what helps us recognize both of these subjects. Shade, now and forever, and then hope poster, which we know represents Barack Obama.
aren't those more based off of color?
They are, but the shape is what helps us recognize who it is. The contour line and the way the shapes are position one another. If the shapes aren't really accurately, it won't look like Barack Obama. You follow me? It's really dependent first upon shape and then color. All right, we're at the end, and I want to quickly flip and pass out to you. We're going to do a little practice test here in the last few minutes of class. Everybody ready? We'll get through as many of these as we can. And this is going to give you an idea of what I mean by a bonus question. And I'm going to give you some sample multiple choice questions. If we don't get to finish them all, you can just keep this as a study tool, and you can finish them, the multiple choice questions, between now and Monday, okay? Okay, here we go. Alana, can you see the practice test?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Now, notice, we're gonna just read out on the first page of bonus. I'm asking you to list the elements of art, to list the three categories of art, to list the components of art. Y'all see that on the listing page? I'll let you do that later. What I want to do with you right now is the image identification. Is everybody following? All right, this is what this is going to be like. I'm going to have you do some listing, and then I'm going to have you identify and answer some questions, fill in the blank. Here's number one. There's two blanks. Artist and title. Write them in. If you know the artist and the title, write it on the paper. If you don't know it, then you know what you need to study for.
is this, where's this?
Artist and title. Artist and title. Okay, right down here. Artist and title. This is not just listing, this is identifying, right? I'll let you do your listing at home. We don't have time to do it in class today. It's going to be an option for your bonus options, right? Number two, artist and title. artist and compositional structure. Write down the name of the artist and tell me what the compositional structure is. These are all out of chapter 1.
Wait, where on the page it says artist and title. So where do I write the concept?
Well, I'm asking, you're gonna be looking at these questions. I should put our compositional structure there, okay? Just answer what is being asked up here. You can put the title too if you want, but I'm asking the name of the artist and the compositional structure. Two different things to fill in the blank, okay? Number 4, artist and art period. Remember the art period we learned? Artist and period. That's from chapter 1. These are, and I'm going to give you 10. These are each worth 1 point. If you get half of it right, you get a half a point. If you get both of them right, you get a full point.
And that's bonus.
Bonus. Optional. You don't even have to do this if you don't want, but that would be crazy. Okay? I don't have any fill in the blank in the regular test. This is bonus. But it measures what you, it's just another way of measuring what you know. And I'm going to give you extra points if you get them, right? Okay, chapter 2. Look at this, the 4 fill in the blanks beneath that. Artist and title. Number 2, artist and compositional structure. I don't know that we actually named the compositional structure. It's curvilinear dominance. Curvilinear dominance is one of the 15, right? Just like Jackson Pollock's paintings, right? Curving, 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 curving. Artist and title. And when you give me the artist name, the last name will suffice. Right? I mean, if you know both, fine, but I'll give you credit if you just tell me the last name. Okay, very quickly. One more. Artist and period. Okay, I may be rushing you a bit, but we need to move on. Now let's do as many multiple choice questions as we can with the time we have. All right, now go to your multiple choice. You don't have a Scantron, so you can just write on the paper. You're going to keep these, okay? Ready? These are typical questions. Number 1. Which category of art does this represent? A, B, C, D, or E? And I encourage you to read all the way down to E. Some students just mess up because they don't read all the way down. So I want you to carefully read each option before you circle the right answer, okay? Number 2. What was the symbolic significance of the design of the United States Capitol and the U.S. Supreme Court building with the architecture of ancient Greece and Rome? Read carefully. Number 3. And number 4. just do a couple more, it's already 12:16. Number 6. We'll do some more if you want. You want to stay for another several minutes? Yeah? Yeah, okay, number 7. And 8. Number 9. And 10. And 11. And 12. And 13. Fourteen. And last image, 15. Now, these questions are actually going to be on your test, so you're actually getting some of the actual questions. What I do at the end of the time, and there will be 50 multiple choice, I will ask, would you like to go back and look at an individual picture? Like maybe you didn't get number 3. All you gotta do is raise your hand and I will go back. When I give the test, I look around at everybody's face and I can pretty much tell if you finished with the question or not. If I go too quickly, you can say, please slow down. I mean, you know, but at the end, I always allow for people to ask questions, and I'll go back and show you number 10 or number 12 or whatever number you want to see again, okay? All right, and the only thing I didn't give you a sample of today is the matching. You've got chapter 1 glossary, you're gonna have 15 words off of that list. And the chapter 2 glossary, you're gonna have 10 words off of this. I give you the definition, I give you the word, you put them together, okay? I don't have that part of the practice test, but I wanted you to see basically what the bonus would be like and how we will navigate through the multiple choice.
This exam is on Monday.
This Monday, chapter 1 and 2.
I'll be sure.
And that's when you will have your study guide to turn into me. You should be in good shape for that. And question?
So for the bonus stuff, for the artist and the title,
Let's fill in the blank.
so, and also with the composition structure, if you just put curvilinear, that does, do we need for that or curvilinear galvanized?
Well, curvilinear will suffice, but it's really titled dominantly curvilinear dominant. But if you put curvilinear, I'd get it. Okay? All right. Hopefully this will make you feel better. Go check yourself on your answers. We don't really have time to go over the answers, but you know whether or not you knew, didn't you? Okay? And remember, A, B, C, D, or E. Number one, the correct answer is E. C and D. Non-representational art and non-objective art are the same thing. The best answer is E, right? I do that quite a few times. Sometimes I'll say none of these, sometimes I'll say all of these. So you gotta get down and read every option, because I want you to do well on multiple choice. There's nothing out of, there's no surprises on these questions. Every single question is information we did discuss and emphasize, okay? So it's very straightforward, and there's 4 bulleted facts. If you give me more than 4 facts, I'll give you bonus points even on your study guide, okay? All right, y'all have a great weekend, and I'll see you Monday at 11, and we'll do a great job on our chapter 1 and 2 test. I do think so.
Have a great day.
All right, let's do. No, like, and again, nothing comes out of left field. Everything is information that we have discussed or emphasized in class, so that should help.
I'm gonna give it my best shot.
Okay, good job. That's all I can ask. Are you good?
Yeah.
Okay.
Excuse me. You're good.
Did you find your ID the other day?
I did.
All right.
It was actually in my bag under my note cards.
Okay, well, drives you nuts when things like that happen.
It does.
Yeah, losing your phone, losing a credit card, losing a car, losing a driver's license, all that. So many people.
Right. Well, you have a good day and a great weekend.
All right, I'm gonna try to.
Yes, ma'am. Don't work too hard.
That's what I'm gonna be doing. I've got a lot of brush to clear and haul to my burn pile. I have all of brush and limbs and tree limbs piled really high on this 20-foot trailer. It's just sitting there, and I gotta haul it into the back and get it all off of there.
Oh
My
man.
arms are gonna be so scratched up. I'll have to make certain I wear leather gloves.
Yes, ma'am.
Anyway, yes, what am I to-dos?
Yes, ma'am. I have a list
Okay.
myself.